When I started talking to people for this podcast, the goal was to create a book-ended snapshot that chronicles the past year and how brands, agencies, and creatives are approaching AI at this crucial nascent moment. I've talked to major brands like Coca-Cola, Sephora, and Google, agencies like Accenture Song, the Brandtech Group, and Omnicom Advertising Group, and experimental creatives like Jason Zada, Ian Tate, and Richard Turley. But there was another perspective I really wanted to dig into. Originally, this was supposed to be a 6-episode series, but I had to add one more episode after OpenAI, the world's most famous AI brand, aired an ad during the Super Bowl. Okay, so maybe on its face, a huge company advertising during the biggest televised commercial day of the year isn't exactly a shock. But given OpenAI's roots as a nonprofit created to ensure AI was developed to benefit humanity, this Super Bowl ad felt like the official start of a new era for the company. It also exemplified the trend we discussed last week of companies not just using AI tools to develop their marketing, but marketing the AI tools themselves. Like everything to do with AI, the brand aspect of this category is evolving and changing seemingly week to week. There's newer brands like Anthropic, Perplexity, DeepSeek, alongside established giants' own sub-brands like Apple Intelligence, Google Gemini, Amazon's Rufus AI assistant, and on and on. With about 400 million users and almost constant news coverage, OpenAI may be the best-known purely AI company on the planet. On March 31st, the company announced it had closed its $40 billion funding round, the most ever raised by a private tech company, boosting its valuation to $300 billion. With such massive funding comes the pressure to grow and grow revenue to justify these astronomical numbers, something the AI industry overall is faced with. The role of brand building in navigating that challenge will be fascinating to watch. We've spent 6 episodes largely talking about how brands are using and thinking about AI. But this week, the question is, how does an AI company become a brand? I'm Jeff Beer, and this is Brand New World from Fast Company. Today's episode, prompting a new brand era. Kate Roush joined OpenAI as its first ever chief marketing officer in December last year. Before that, she was CMO at crypto company Coinbase since 2021, after more than 11 years at Meta, including a role as global head of brand and product marketing for Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and Facebook. When she was at Coinbase, she oversaw the brand's viral 2022 Super Bowl ad. You remember, the 60 seconds of a floating QR code in full DVD logo screen mode? It sent 20 million hits to the brand's website in a minute and sent its app from the 186th spot in the App Store to number 2. This explains her enthusiasm for the occasion that we'll dive into. But first, I started by asking Kate what drew her to becoming OpenAI's first ever CMO.
What got me on board was really just the magic mix of technology, frankly, and frontier technology. That's really what I've spent my career doing. So, I joined Facebook when it was about 500 million users and, around 1,500 employees. So pretty early in its journey. I joined Coinbase right as it was IPOing for the first time. But really at the moment where crypto became more of a mass market, rose to mass market awareness for the first time. And then now seeing really AI at this tipping point, I think, of coming into the public consciousness as truly, I think and believe, the most revolutionary technology that we've seen in our lifetimes. The technology itself, and then really feeling like OpenAI was a founder-led company that had kind of a shared set of values that I could really, hopefully, we'll see, but help. The experience that I've had scaling with these types of companies that are introducing kind of frontier technology to more mass audiences is now something I've done a couple times and really felt like, wow, this technology is actually the most innovative, the most disruptive, the most transformative of my lifetime. And there's just no way to sit on the sideline when you see that.
It's an interesting case because it is like, yeah, you're joining one of the more famous, if not the most famous company in this revolutionary new category, right?
Yep. I mean, I think in many ways, this is a company that really invented the category with the launch of ChatGPT, at least for consumer mindshare.
For sure. When ChatGPT kind of launched, it just became obviously there are competitors, but it's not quite maybe not the Kleenex or Q-tip of Gen AI, but it's pretty damn close.
Exactly. A noun.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe I didn't use Google there. I used Q-tips, for God's sakes. Speaking of, okay, so frontier tech to mass audience, one of your first moves is to decide in December to do a Super Bowl ad. This is not normal. This is people start their Super Bowl plans. A lot of people, I mean, conservatively in the summer.
Yes.
Sometimes before, but I would say summer is okay, let's get things started. What from the phrase, the frontier tech to mass audience, there is no more mass collective audience, I suppose, than the Super Bowl. What was your thinking there in terms of let's do it? How did this come about?
There were a couple contributing factors. One is, frankly, this is a very mission-driven company that's really all about ensuring the most advanced AGI and sort of the most advanced artificial intelligence benefits all people, right? And part of benefiting all people is that they can access the technology, that they have it in their pocket and can for free via products like ChatGPT. But part of that is actually making sure that people understand that the technology is here and what it can do. But you can't benefit from something, even if you have access to it, if you don't understand it and don't really understand the moment in time that we're in. And one of the interesting things about ChatGPT and OpenAI's technology is that it has been adopted disproportionately by the young, actually. And we can talk more about that. But to have the opportunity where people of all ages are sitting in a living room together, watching a show is a pretty rare, all across the country is a pretty rare moment, right? The Super Bowl is unique in that way. And one of the things I think we're really seeing in Silicon Valley right now, and certainly in the AI space, is there's this saying, the future is here, it's unevenly distributed. And that's really true. So I think that how far advanced the technology is and sort of mass understanding of the technology is not the same. There's a lag between what sort of really mass consumer audiences understand and what's possible to do today. And so the Super Bowl was really about starting to communicate and putting a stake in the ground that part of our job is to really help people across society understand the moment that we're in, the dawn of the intelligence age. This isn't just like a new widget. This is like a fundamental leap in human technology and history. And it's in your pocket right now. And it was just a moment to really state that, like kind of plant that flag. And then we obviously have a lot of more work to do to kind of help people really use the tools.
Yeah. Did you, I found it interesting that because it is such on one hand, easy, but I imagine on the other, quite difficult thing to kind of explain what it is and what you can do with it. There's so much. It's kind of like, okay, well, you have to compare it to things, but it's kind of, it's not real. There's no real direct comparison. I did like how the animation was rooted in the dot, which is also rooted in the product when I'm using finger quotes, thinking, and people will be familiar with that. I go back to something like Google's Parisian Love or using a search bar. Like it's like using the product to kind of as a creative device almost, but it's still a part of it. How much of that kind of thinking was a part of the creative process?
A big part of the thinking. So we really are trying, I think in all of the advertising that we'll do, we'll really try to show and lead with the technology and what it can do for people and how it can benefit people. And certainly, there's a nod in the creative device we used, which was basically, if you haven't seen it, kind of almost a pointillist style that gets more sophisticated as these innovations kind of get more sophisticated over time. And that dot or that point that makes up the kind of core of the style is, as Jeff, you're saying, the cursor that really answers your question within ChatGPT. So there's like a clear through line with the visual style in that execution and the product. We also used Sora, which is one of our tools, sort of a visual video tool, to concept the ad and to help create it more in terms of, how can we produce this thing in like a month, which is the time frame that we were up against. Not so much as, and I think AI has often been pitted against human creativity, not as a substitute for, the amazing creative team and our partners at Accenture Song, who are actually in Builders Club, who are making the ad creative, but really as a tool to help assist them. So in everything we do, we try to show what the product can do and really lead with the product and get people into the product. We also had an extension where if you started searching, you got curious about the ad, you started searching for ChatGPT. We did kind of like a custom experience where we sort of helped people that were maybe newer to ChatGPT have almost like a Mad Libs experience where we held their hand a little bit on like prompts they might want to enter or how they might want to use the product. Because to your point, it's almost like an embarrassment of riches. There's so much that it can do that you don't even think to ask it, that trying to handhold people a little bit and help them figure out how to access all of the power behind the hood is really something that we're trying to think about.
Yeah. And I mean, again, speaking of embarrassment of riches, I mean, the idea is like, well, what do we focus on? I imagine. I mean, I have conversations with folks. We have someone on the podcast, Nilesh Ashros, who talks a lot about this stuff. But one thing he was talking about was like, God, so much of the focus when it comes to AI tools is, when you're talking about the creative industry, is about efficiencies and how to make a Super Bowl in a month, or was that or how does it help do that? Which are perfectly valid questions, but it's like there's so much more of like, how can it augment the human creativity in ways that it's like, as opposed to, what was it? I can't remember the phrase he used. It was something like, using a Ferrari as a golf cart or something like that. It was like, there's so much to do that we're only on the cusp here. So I imagine from a storytelling, product demo aspect, there's a challenge there. And I just realized that when we spoke last about the Super Bowl, you used the phrase, I have it written in my notes here, the Ferrari for the mind. You're talking about balancing between like historical significance and practical usability. And how do you sort of balance those two things? So the Super Bowl ad airs.
Yep.
What was the response? What kind of insights did you guys get from that response, and just generally seeing it out in the world from a brand storytelling perspective? One of the first pieces of creative in that way for OpenAI. What have you guys kind of learned from it? What was the response, and how do you look at it in hindsight?
Number one, the ad really felt true to the mission of the company, that we really are seeking the scientific frontier and really trying to build a tool and a set of tools that will fundamentally help humanity advance as some of the kind of innovations that we featured in the ad did in their time. And that's obviously like a pretty bold and ambitious and confident statement to compare your sort of your innovation to like the wheel. But that's very true to what we actually believe that we are creating and building for people here at OpenAI. So I think, as a marketer, and frankly, this is a company of, the nucleus of this company is a bunch of people that have like won the Fields Medal, and they're sort of like modern day Albert Einsteins. And you need to make sure that what you're doing feels authentic to the core mission of what they're building in the world. And so I think like as the first piece of advertising that this company has ever created, which is wild, the ad really, it hit on that dimension. It really felt true to the people who are building the core technology in terms of what are they actually focused on and why. And it is this kind of, this endeavor of sort of human curiosity and creativity and really empowering people with ever kind of the most powerful tool in human history, which they're working on. And so I think that felt really great. We knew that the creative construct of the ad, obviously it was black and white, it was totally graphic. That's not the typical Super Bowl ad format. There's no celebrity, there's no giveaway. Like, it's a very different ad construct. And so, of course, those ad constructs are going to have people that really like them and really are into what you're doing. And then there are going to be people like, where's
the celebrity?
Hold my beer. Yeah. Where's the celebrity? Why? I hate this. Like, what is this? And we knew we would see that, and we did see that. Now, from my perspective as a marketer, like, if I'm generating that kind of conversation about what are we doing, I think that's a win. And very much part of this ad was meant to generate conversation. What is OpenAI building? What is this stuff? Like, that's actually core to the construct of what we were aiming to do. So I think the Coinbase ad, which I know, we've talked about in the past, so that was kind of another Super Bowl ad that I did that was very out of the norm in terms of like the visual construct. And I also did that with the same creative partner, David Drogo, who I know you've had on the show. And, David and I often laugh that ad got voted the best and the worst. It's like the only ad he's ever been part of that got voted the best ad of the Super Bowl and the worst ad of the Super Bowl. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's a little early for the awards season or anything to come out, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that for this one. And again, to me, that's kind of a feature, not a bug of what we're trying to do in terms of generating conversation, getting people to actually engage with the brand, and to pay attention to this moment in history and what's actually happening.
Obviously, you can't please everyone, and the post-game on OpenAI's Super Bowl performance was mixed. Reviews ranged from too simple to perfectly simple. But I think what counts, and what's important to remember, is that this was just the first small, albeit insanely high-profile, step in a marathon Roush and the company are running. A marathon to establish a true emotional connection with its users, particularly that younger audience Kate talked about, and tell us not only what it can do, but what it stands for. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, I'm going to talk to Kate about brand building lessons from the past and what she sees as the path forward in trying to craft the first ever iconic AI brand. Back in 1997, Steve Jobs introduced Apple's now iconic Crazy Ones ad campaign to a group of developers. But beforehand, he talked about the role of marketing for a company like Apple.
To me, marketing's about values. This is a very complicated world. It's a very noisy world. And we're not going to get a chance to get people to remember much about us. No company is. And so we have to be really clear on what we want them to know about us.
Jobs used that commitment to core brand values to build Apple into arguably the most iconic brand on the planet. So given OpenAI's brand ambitions, I wanted to hear about their core brand values and how Kate and her colleagues will be telling the world about them in their work. It's a massive question that basically boils down to, how do you do your job? I'll spare you the tape of my long rambling setup to this question when I actually interviewed Kate, but she did poke a little fun at me before giving a thoughtful answer. It's fascinating, and so I'm wondering how you think about that, communicating those values in a
Just
outline how you're going to do that and what's happening. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the question.
That's the job, I suppose.
That's the job, yes. So I think we'll talk about that hopefully more than once. How I think about this is I still do fundamentally believe that your experience with the product drives a really important part of your experience with the company. There's a reason that Steve Jobs was obsessive about what like the motherboards of his computers looked like, right? That's not an accident that they built the brand of Apple on top of that care and love and intention that was and craft that was put in to the core product experience. I think a company like Apple, yes, while they were introducing a new kind of computer back in the day, there was at least a concept of the computer. Now, certainly over time, they had to introduce kind of more new categories maybe, but there were still referent examples, right? Like you had a phone, and now this was a totally different kind of phone, but like with AI, I think there is a bit of a unique thing where we're truly introducing a new category, that I think we'll see actually really different over time human-computer core interfaces. Like this is a step change. This isn't like a new search bar. This is a fundamentally different technology. And so I think there's one job is really just to help meet people where they are and in the product and actually really help them take advantage of it and really understand, get to that kind of like magic moment where you're like, oh, I can't believe it can do this. I will say for myself, that moment that you have, and for everybody, it's different. For me, it was talking to my kids. I have a 6 and a 3-year-old about taking this job. And, you know, I have to travel more for this job. And so I was trying to explain it to them. And I pulled up ChatGPT on voice mode and I started to have them talk to me about like what kind of story they wanted it to tell. So like we read stories together a lot. And we did this kind of like collaborative story where they were like, oh, we want it to be in the desert, but we want the sand to be diamonds. And I want a horse named this and a sloth named this. And they do these, and like watching them interact with it was just this like moment of like total delight. They were just amazed. And now they, you know, they love ChatGPT, and they often, when they ask me a question, are like, Mom, if you don't know, just ask ChatGPT, like whatever. But I do think like those moments of magic in the technology are such a big part. Now, and a way to express the values, and a way to show people, because I also think we're in an age of diminished trust in institutions, in tech, in a lot of different things, right? An age of reduced optimism where people maybe don't feel like the best is yet to come, the best for their children. Maybe their children will be worse off than they are. There are a lot of studies about these things. And so I think as marketers, really anchoring on things we know to be like the felt sense is true and authentic. The role of manifesto-style brand advertising, it's more complicated in these environments. And I think when you have a technology as magical, and really it is magical when you see it unlock for you, that's just such a good place to start. There's a big job to be done, but that's at least my incoming orientation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm picturing a commercial of kids asking their parents about, you know, creating a story, because that is so much. I mean, obviously, to your point, there's more connection to past products with things like whether it's going from a laptop to a iPhone to a iPad or Alexa, or, you know, there's kind of like there are these connections to our where this technology is a bit different that way. That's for sure.
I do think there's another thing that we're really focused on, and that I'm really focused on as I think about marketing this company and this technology, which is like ChatGPT is like the fastest growing consumer app in history. It already has more than 400 million weekly active users with literally no advertising. I mean, just totally organic product market fit. And that's great. But the most interesting thing is that almost all of those people, or the vast majority, are under the age of 35. In the US, a third are between the ages of 18 and 24. People are using this, and they're using it to learn, like learning, tutoring, homework. Those are like very common use cases for ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I don't think it gets covered this way in the press very much, or that people necessarily have understood that like ChatGPT is like a generational. If you go look on like TikTok or social media about how young people think about and talk about chat and the role that it's playing in their life, and they call it that, they call it chat. It reminds me of the days when people used to like sleep on the sidewalks outside of Apple stores to wait for the new thing. Like there is like a really interesting, very youth-based thing happening in this product. And that's going to be core to like how we start to actually market this product and who we're talking to also, which is just helpful to.
For sure. Obviously, they're very, very different. But I remember we spoke when you were at Coinbase, and one thing you talked about was there's the image of the crypto investor, and then there's the reality of the crypto investor. And in that case, it was crypto bros and Lambos or something, and versus everyday people. And you guys had made a really well done campaign around that. Like these users aren't, or investors aren't necessarily who you might think they are, or who's depicted most in the media. Any lessons from that experience of like the kind of narrative around the technology or a company versus the bottom up cultural reality of it that has been particularly helpful here?
Yes, I think it's really cemented my belief in starting with the like fanatical adopters and really understanding who they are and why they love your technology and what will make them get more out of it and what they see it as kind of helping them with. And then growing from that nucleus out, as opposed to so many marketers and big companies think of like the overall sort of total addressable market and then try to make the technology like immediately almost water down the core of what the actual promise is by broadening it too much or getting too generic or surface with what the message is. When I think so much of the actual power in how you market this is actually in the specificity of what it can do for you. We'll see. I mean, obviously, this is a different category, it's a different technology, but my hypothesis is we're going to see that actually by zeroing in and sort of having a conversation with a smaller group of people, but that is overheard by a larger group of people, will be a more effective strategy than sort of starting with a very widely diffuse group of people that we're trying to talk to.
That's interesting. I look forward to seeing how that, because I do think that there's a lot of smart brands over the last, I don't know, maybe, I want to say 5 years, but it could be longer or shorter. But there's a good number of brands that have very smartly focused in on like fandom in a way that is, I mean, this is not exactly, I know I'm not like repeating, but that idea of what you're saying, but like that, just that idea of depth over breadth in that way, and the depth leads to breadth if you can do it right. So we've been focusing kind of a bit on like the pairing this technology and this brand to other categories and how it doesn't really fit. I'm curious about how you think about the OpenAI's competitive set. There are other Gen AI companies, obviously, clearly, you know, with varying levels of hype depending on what the product is or what their founder says or how cheap it was to make. You talk about the impact of like DeepSeek and like, oh my God, the awareness around this. And how do you guys think, because it is such a new category, how do you think about brand differentiation in that respect?
Listen, it's a competitive category, for sure. And we're going up, against both startups, whether those are domestic or coming from places like China, which has obviously national sort of geopolitical issues within it. There are also obviously like the huge corporations, FAANG, that are, out there and have, hundreds of thousands of employees, to OpenAI's, whatever, 2,000. So it's a wild, wild market. What I'd say is there are a few things and touchstones for us. The first is the actual intelligence and the innovation. And yes, while there are a bunch of great models out there and good technology, like OpenAI is consistently at the frontier and innovating towards the frontier. The mission of the company is really anchored on safe, advanced general intelligence. Its goal is to create artificial general intelligence, and that is a technological advantage that the company has, and I think will continue to have. And you see it in the sort of like blistering pace of shipping of different models and capabilities that's really core to the company. I think on the other hand, we're a AI company. A lot of our certainly bigger competitors, in order to have AI win, have to disrupt their core business models, which are ad-driven models, right? So if they have to self-disrupt to win in AI, and we don't have that. AI is our business. There's just, I think, a purity of the model that it really allows us to sort of do the right thing for an AI product without other business considerations, because we're not running an ad business and we're not running 5 other different consumer businesses that may or may not sit in tension with the AI play. That is our business. So I think we sort of have the technological lead. We have a certain kind of purity of what we're trying to focus, I guess. And then the other thing is we really, I think, have nailed the consumer experience in a way that is unique and is something that we'll continue to invest in and really double down on. A lot of our competitors in the sort of smaller AI labs that also sort of are purely focused on AI, they're a little bit more niche. They're more niche use cases. No one else has kind of cracked the scaled consumer use case. Now, that doesn't mean we can sit on our laurels. Like, we have to innovate and build every single day to maintain that lead. But I do think that those are some arrows in our quiver.
For sure. The other thing that's sort of interesting in terms of, I don't say comparison to past eras, but certainly, and you mentioned this at the top as one of the attractions, like this strong founder-led company, and you mentioned, where's the celebrity in the Super Bowl ad, but like Sam is kind of the face of the company in so many ways. This isn't a new challenge when it comes to certainly tech companies, but like the balance between brand and founder-led brand. How do you think about that as a marketer?
I mean, listen, authenticity is at the core of trust. I really believe that's true. And so I think the more we can show up in ways that are authentic, even if they're not, like, you would never read about them in any kind of like PR.
Right.
I think in a more traditional kind of corporate environment, your CEO is very scripted. You're really tightly fisted about what gets out in the world. And that's just not the reality of a company, a frontier innovation company. Like, these are internet native founders. There's, I think, a real movement among Valley founders to go direct. You're seeing that across the board with a lot of different founders. And I think that's really based on a lot of very smart insights from the last 10 years that you need to tell your story directly, certainly through partners in the media, certainly through advertising and other vehicles, but that there really is an important role for you to get out there and interact directly with your audience, whether you're the brand or the founder. And even if those aren't always perfectly synced up, and even if, you make people mad sometimes, that's way better, because at least you're sort of showing your homework and being out there and in an authentic way in public. And so I think that's really what you're seeing in our approach.
Yeah. And it's certainly the approach that seems to resonate most with the exact audience you're talking about.
Yes. I mean, right, exactly. And it's kind of, young people are on social media. They want to see, CEOs in those formats.
Yeah.
And they don't trust like a corporate spokesperson in that way. So
yeah. What are you most excited about? What can we expect from a brand perspective in the next little while throughout 25 that you're most excited about?
Well, hopefully you'll see a lot from us. One thing that you will see from us, I think no surprise based on the conversation we've had, is really practical, helpful use cases that are sort of segment and audience specific. I think it's maybe not the sexiest marketing work, but it's what people need from us. And serving what they need is really what it's about. So you will see different ways to use ChatGPT that are practical and helpful and teach you how to use the product, but in ways that hopefully are not eat your vegetables, but that, you're inspired to do and try and like learn more. So that's one set of things. Ideally, you'll also see a set of work from us that actually just shows inspiring kind of like avant-garde ways to use the technology, and that it could like really on the sort of like frontier of inspiration of, whoa, I would never have thought that that's possible to do, as a marketer or whatever vantage point that you're going to sort of coming at the execution from. So I think some show not tell about the like range and possibility of the technology is another thing that I really hope to get out there. And then you will see some more values-driven work. It won't be in traditional formats, but it definitely is stuff that we're thinking about.
I love that because it's like, here, look, yeah, you can use this Ferrari as a golf cart, but what about this that will be very cool to see. Kate, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
While we're all either worrying about the impending robot apocalypse or hailing a new technological age, there's a massive gray area between that existential level and using generative AI to help you write a better email. The job for OpenAI's brand is to bridge that divide. There is plenty to learn from past examples for any new AI brand. Cautionary tales from the dot-com bubble. Evergreen insights from iconic brands from Patagonia to Pepsi. But to Kate's point, this is an entirely new category. One that also has to learn some lessons and set some precedents of its own. Perhaps there's no better example that we are in uncharted waters than in early April when OpenAI unveiled a new text-to-image feature for ChatGPT that had a filter to turn regular images into Studio Ghibli-style animation. Sounds super normal and fun. Until the official White House X account used it to post an image of a weeping woman from the Dominican Republic recently arrested by US immigration agents. Not a great look for any brand. This is the final episode of Brand New World's first season. But one thing is clear. For both the OpenAI brand itself and how this transformational technology overall is being used by brands, marketers, advertisers, and creatives of all stripes around the world, this is just the beginning. Brand New World is an MIC podcast from Fast Company. Our producers are Yaz Gagne, Grace Snelling, Blake Odom, and Avery Miles. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Our executive producer and editor is Josh Christensen. Be sure to subscribe to Brand New World on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can also hear all episodes in the Most Innovative Companies podcast feed. If you like this podcast, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, or let us know in the comments of Fast Company's social media. We're basically on every app you can think of.